Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach. It's great to be together. I love days of Yontif. Normally we would be in the chapel, but people still like their space a little bit. But one of the things that I love so much about Yontif is that people flow in, people flow out, right? So some of the regulars are away for the Sidarim, and we have siblings that are here in town visiting. We have parents that are here in town visiting. We have children and grandchildren who are in town visiting, and it's just wonderful to be able to be together in person. And so what a joy. I always like to give something on first day that you can use at your Seder for tonight. So I have copies here that you can take for something fresh. You guys were excited and your dad was like, no, we're not making the Seder any longer. So I saw that whole thing play out right there. But this is, I love this wait, don't tell me game that Rabbi Rob Scheinberg, who actually, for the credit of the congregation, grew up here at Bethel and has many accomplishments all on his own right, as a rabbi in Hoboken, New Jersey. And every year he puts together this game like Wait, Don't Tell Me. In this case, there's 2 true stories and 1 false. So just as a suggestion, the way we did it last night was we interspersed each story at different points along the way. So it's too long if you read all 3 at once, but intersperse, 1 along the way and then continue, and then number 2, and then number 3 towards the end. So there'll be copies here on the front chairs after services that you can grab one and then include it in your Seder tonight. But that's not what I wanted to focus on Chag Sameach. No one ever complained about too short of a teaching, right? But I've been thinking about some other things, and a little bit this is building off of a class, my Skolnick class that I just finished up this week, that David Margulies and I were in the class, and many others. The title of the class was Perspectives on God, and it seems like Passover is a good time to also be thinking about God. And what I'm reading from is Jonathan Sacks. He has a Haggadah with many essays in it. It's really a terrific book, a terrific collection. And so I wanted to start by reading from here. Great. So there'll be a little history on the first text. He writes, the Seder service on Pesach is the oldest surviving ritual in the Western world, dating back some 3,300 years to the night, possibly in the reign of Ramses II, when the Israelites ate their last meal in Egypt, preparing for their journey to freedom. Certain features still remain from the biblical times, the matzah and maror, the reminder of the paschal offering, a mere reminder until the rebuilding of the temple, the questions asked by a child, and the explanations given by an adult. In some communities, especially Oriental ones, it is still the custom to dress as the Israelites did then, your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Did anyone dress up in any way last night? A kittel, okay, or in a kittel as well. So, but that wasn't the attire of leaving and going on a trip. Today, the attire might be more dressed with clothes from REI or something like that, is what the modern equivalent would be. The Seder is, of course, more than a ritual. It is an act of remembering, the telling of a story, the Haggadah, and none has been more lovingly sustained. Each age has added something of its own. In the course of a single night, we encounter, as well as biblical passages, Hillel in the days of the Second Temple, the 2nd century sages at their Seder in Bnei Brak, the teachings of the Amoraim in the 3rd and later centuries, poems by Yanai and Kalir from the post-Talmudic period, an edition from Ashkenaz provoked by the terrible suffering of the First Crusade, and children's songs from medieval Germany. Every word we say has a history. Even the Manishtana, the questions asked by a child, go back some 2,000 years. The weaving together of these many contributions into a single narrative is the achievement of no ordinary author. It is the collective voice of the Jewish people through centuries and continents as it has encountered and responded to the Word of God. When we are looking at the Haggadah, it is a collection of so many different sources that are brought together. And remember, the goal is not to get from page 1 to page whatever at the end. The goal is to tell the story, and these are prompts along the way. So the only requirements, as Rabbi Megdal said, are just 3 simple requirements, but it is not prescriptive as to how to achieve those, though it offers us a guide. Through the Haggadah, more than 100 generations of Jews have handed on their story to their children. The word Haggadah means relate, tell, expound, but it's closely related to another Hebrew root which means bind, join, connect. By reciting the Haggadah, Jews give the children a sense of connectedness to Jews throughout the world and to the Jewish people through time. It joins them to a past and future, a history and destiny, and makes them characters in its drama. Every other nation known to mankind has been united because its members lived in the same place, spoke the same language, were part of the same culture. Jews alone, dispersed across continents, speaking different languages and participating in different cultures, have been bound together by a narrative, the Pesach narrative, which they told in the same way on the same night. More than the Haggadah was the story of a people, Jews were the people of a story. I love this idea that it is our story that keeps us together. It is our story that creates our identity. It is our story that invites us into this experience that is so much greater than each one of us as individuals. But in this dual narrative of a national story and also as an individual story, sometimes each is very helpful and often each is also inadequate. That if we were only telling the story of a nation, where do I fit into that? But if we were only telling the story about my experience as an individual, we would miss out on this sense of peoplehood. Often the emphasis on one leaves the other feel orphaned, and the other is true as well. In other words, how Judaism nurtures our sense of self and God and caring for me as an individual, and a God guiding the Jewish people as a nation with a less regard for the individual is important for us to balance. And I believe that the Seder is the intersection of both of these experiences. So one, how, and this is a question for you, how is Passover our national story? What are examples of how the Seder is the story of our national story, our people, our collective story? And since you just read it last night, I know that you're experts at it. Yeah, Karen. Each generation, right? That each generation, we are part of this story. So that's not an individual, that is our collective sense, each generation. Terrific. Are there other examples of how the Passover story is the collective? That we were slaves in Egypt, and it's that not I was a slave in Egypt, but we collectively were slaves in Egypt, and we're telling our narrative from slavery to freedom to redemption. That is the narrative arc of the Haggadah and of the story. That if you, like my dad, didn't know the redemption comes at the end of the Haggadah, it doesn't mean at mealtime you are redeemed from experiencing the Haggadah. So, but that is the narrative arc: slavery to freedom to redemption. Right? And in that same sense that Michael said, of course, Dayenu is the same thing, right? Individually, but the focus is on the collective. Ilu hotzi anu mi mitzrayim, right? And you can do as many verses as your custom in your family is, but that it is that if we had only had X or Y or Z, it would have been enough. If we'd only been brought out of Egypt, it would have been enough. But Passover is also I'm sorry, was there one more idea?
The Exodus is also the first time we do something larger than a family unit.
So that the Exodus experience is the first time, it was said, that we do something greater than a family unit. We're doing something as a large group. I'm just thinking, right? So when Avram lech lechaz, right? That's his family unit that is going forward. When other things are going, these are families or people connected. This is an experience that is much greater. So that's great, and that's part of our national identity. So now let's flip to Passover as our individual story. So Passover is also our individual story. We're told to make it our individual story, right? That Gamaliel says, each and every generation, a person is obligated, right? This is the flip to the other side of what Karen said. Everyone is obligated to see themselves as if they had left Egypt. That's an individual experience. The individual is tied to the national identity. Or halach ma'anya, I think, is also an individual experience. This is the bread of affliction that our ancestors ate, right? So me today in relation to this ancestral historic experience as well. And I'll tell you, nothing gets more personal than the 10th commandment of all of the complexity and morals surrounding that as how does this relate to me? So I'm very interested in that here at Passover, we have this tie, this intersection of the Jewish people, but also of the individual. And I think that we need both. I think that we need both because if this was a story that was only about me, well, then it would only be about me, and we would miss the richness of history and lineage and something so much greater than me. And if we only had this national story that was filled with aspiration and inspiration, well, where do I fit into that great collective? Right? That it is both of these that are required. That Sachs writes, the Israelites were about to go free. 9 of the 10 plagues had already taken place. The 10th, they knew, would be the last. According to the biblical account, Moses gathered the people and instructed them on the preparations they were to make. By any standard, it was an epic moment. For 210 years, the Israelites had been in exile. They had experienced suffering, slavery, and attempted genocide. Now they were about to begin the journey known to history as the Exodus. What would Moses say? He might have spoken about freedom or the promised destination, the land flowing with milk and honey. He might have chosen to speak about the arduous journey that lay ahead, what Nelson Mandela called the long road to freedom. Any of these would have been the great speech of a great leader. Moses did none of those things. Instead, he spoke about children and the distant future and the duty to pass on memory to generations yet unborn. 3 times he turned to this theme. And if your child should ask you, what is this rite you perform? You shall say, and the Torah continues on. Or later he says, and you shall tell your child on that day, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I went out of Egypt. And finally, Sachs brings the words of Moses, and if in that time your child should ask you, what is this? You should tell them. About to gain their freedom, the Israelites were told that they were to become a nation of educators. That is what made Moses not just a great leader, but a unique one. Freedom, he was suggesting, is won not on the battlefield, nor in the political arena, but in the human imagination and will. So we are a people, and we are individuals. And greatest of all, we are a nation of educators. We are a people of educators. Intrinsic in this moment and in tonight is the opportunity to teach and to inspire and to embrace, to bring people into our stream of a nation and to pass on the relevance and the meaning of Judaism, of what it means to you and what it means to be part of the Jewish people. Shabbat Shalom. Chag Sameach.